The next few days were good ones to say the least. I attended class, wrote a few stories, answered a lot of questions, and went to work to tell a lot of stories and answer a lot of questions. But when I wasn't doing that, I was fielding requests from all quarters. I will relay a few. No, I don't mind if you send somebody to the next game to measure the heads of various Dlamacens to create custom helmets, but you could just as easily get the specifications for sizes from our military and save yourself several hours and the travel expenses. No, I do not mind if you come out and get foot sizes and anatomy charts to figure out the optimal footwear design for a Dlamacen athlete, but we don't normally wear shoes at all. If you really need it, reach out to Captain Bonnie through the embassy. The scouts do wear footwear a lot, and she can save you time and money. Maybe she'll even have some examples you can buy. Yes, I can do an interview, but everything has to go through the Barnum Cooperation. They will arrange it. I spent a lot of time at the kitchen table, and Fauve never seemed to lose that satisfied expression, though she was ever so sweet about my sudden leap into the public eye. Again. The reason for my sudden renown was the handing over of the lion's share of the credit for the invention of Ballyball. Though I passed some back to Coach Wills for some impromptu innovations, maybe I can honestly say I did deserve most of the credit, even if it did come to mind in a drunken stupor. In retrospect, alcohol probably explains most forms of human sports, so it was fitting that the newest craze would originate the same way, from a dead man and his bottomless budget for booze at his final gathering. I think Percival would have approved. The sport, however, gained instant international fame. It was the first of its kind, a sport that required cooperation between humans and aliens, and it was something that both of our worlds wanted. I spent hour after endless hour balancing my efforts between writing up my findings, conducting interviews, and scheduling new games. And there were so many demands for games, I barely had time for anything else. Fauve became my self-appointed secretary in the house after she heard that string of calls, confiscating my datapad and rerouting calls to her own. Rebecca, of course, set down some firm limitations. All schoolwork must be completed daily. All chores must be completed daily. Things of that nature. We still hadn't had any further incidents or threats to the house or the family. But with my renewed prominence thanks to being live-streamed all over the world for several hours straight, both my government and that of Earth decided security should continue for the time being. Getting Captain Bonnie Red a space for drinking and carousing was easy. Muttering the words efficiency and safety to my people's ambassador was all it took to get a few shipping containers set up as an impromptu bar that I would help with stocking. And of course introducing the crew to the vast variety of alcohol that Earth had to offer. But that is a story for the next volume. I still had to make sure that Bosun and his companion weren't shipped off-world, but within a month of submitting my conclusions to Professor Sexlith, he signed off on them and transmitted my short-term study of human Dlamacen cooperative efforts back to the university, along with one more thing: the raw footage of the games. I didn't know he'd done it until I was sitting at the dinner table with Fauve, and she was reading off the latest requests routed through Teresa for a meeting with the heads of several different investors. So, as I was saying, it seems that someone gave the major cooperations of sports investments and manufacturers the idea that you were the only Dlamacen shareholder for the first Ballyball Sports League, and that you were the only one the embassy would listen to about bringing more of your species to Earth to sign on to play the game. Fauve said it with sarcasm so thick and rich that I could have smothered it on the hotcakes William made dad jokes over. But I was lost. How exactly? It probably has something to do with a cooperation being formed in a human's name and then naming you the chief recruitment officer. The $2 million in credits deposited into the account and the public disclosure required by law probably helped. Fauve answered and then handed me an envelope. This came for you today too. What is it? I asked. It had an actual digital seal on the face of it. The Ballyball League Incorporation paperwork. You still need to sign it. She said as if I would have some clue as to what she was talking about. I stared at her, probably looking every bit as dumb as I felt. No, not me. Well, I had help. Fauve admitted. I asked Dad, Mom, and Teresa. I promised her 2 million credits out of my inheritance from Mr. Barnum if she would put down the seed money and help get it popular with sponsorship and franchises and all that other stuff I don't know enough about yet to do myself. I had the idea, but I couldn't do it without people who could pull it off. Dad suggested making it into a cooperative and giving you a position that would make a bunch of rich humans want to keep you here. Mom had a friend of hers in the accounting department of her workplace help put the banking paperwork together to get it registered. So, What exactly does all this mean? I asked. It means Ballyball is an official sport now. That means you can name official teams to different cities all over the world. And because it has to have Dlamacins or some other similar alien species to play it the way it's made, that means there'll be a bunch of people who want to open up immigration and get work visas for more of your people to settle here. And it means you can get a long-term work visa from your government that's even better than your student visa. Before I could respond, I got the ding of a message from the university staff. I swallowed the lump in my throat as soon as I saw it. Fauve knew what it was before I told her. "What is it?" she asked, and I swear that if she'd been made of glass, she would have cracked. "What does it say? Please don't make me wait to find out." Fauve never begged for anything, and this was about as close as she would ever come. Her eyes welled up, and she did her best to blink them back as I silently read the message. I admit, I felt a flash of guilt run through me for making her worry so much before. So I read quickly, faster than I'd ever read before. Then I read it again, out loud. Extraordinary footage. The most remarkable example of interspecies cooperation we have seen since the Gaxa serpent incident. Proof positive that firm bonds, not firm borders, make good neighbors. I slowly lifted my face, but I kept my eyes on the words. We find that while ample study remains to be done due to the very limited and short-term sample size, the only way to effectively conduct further research into interspecies relations is to have familiar eyes on the ground that have already established the systems and methods of said studies. Therefore, we withdraw from consideration the motion to have the locally identified student Bailey Walker removed from the planet Earth prior to the completion of his 50-year study. Contingent, of course, upon the peace between apex predatory species continues without concern for his safety. Wait, so, does that mean... Fauve let the question hang. I could see her chest rising and falling as she threatened to hyperventilate where she stood. "I'm staying," I said. I shot to my feet. "I'm staying. I don't have to leave." If I were capable of tears of joy, I would have shed them. All my hearts raced into my throat, and I let out a wild and joyful, "Row!" And Fauve jumped against me with all her weight and squeezed me tighter than I thought she was capable of. "Yay! I gotta go tell Mom and Dad!" she shouted, and rushed for her datapad to call them wherever they'd gone off to. I'd honestly lost track of their errands in the rush of everything, but I knew they'd be ecstatic. Byron and Bosun were on duty outside and heard the commotion. Rushing into the house, Fauve yelled, "He gets to stay! He gets to stay! Bailey gets to stay!" I wish I could remember everything. I really do. But I didn't record it, and it was such a wild day from there on out that all I remember was an endless series of howling roos that carried on not only from Dlamacin throats, but from those of human ones as well, and somehow, that just made it all the sweeter. Classes and my normal work at my part-time job went smoothly. I'm sure some wondered why I didn't quit. After all, I found an important job. But I considered it part of my study of human dynamics. They were a unique cultural element, and this was the only way to study them. Creative writing continued, and I'd see Lisa on a daily basis. In the days ahead, I'm sure it's no surprise to you that we would become good friends. All those little things, though, they're stories for another day. Captain Bonnie Red's misadventures would become near legend in their own right. Many of them I would be caught up in, wholly against my will, as this volume comes to its end. Let me tell you this about the first evening taking her and her crew on the town. It was a night to remember. By then, every member of the crew became a celebrity on Earth, after all. They and the embassy security teams were the only ones capable of playing ballyball. And with the help of the late Percival T. Barnum's organization, administered by his heir, Teresa, it reached a global audience and promised to spread much, much farther in the very near future. Complete biographies, less the parts that were to be kept secret back then, were composed, and Captain Bonnie became the most renowned of them all, even without her other misadventures. So much more remains to be said. After all, it is a 50-year stay that I've written about, and I debated deeply in my hearts about where to close this volume out. In the end, it was my creative writing teacher who gave me the answer I sought. She would tell me this: you should always end a story with something that makes a person want to read the next one. Every end bears the seed of the new beginning, and you want everyone who reads the last word to long for the next one more than they long for their next breath. So with that in mind, I will tell you what happened the very next day after a house full of ruing walkers and their guards disturbed the whole bloody neighborhood. I was seated at the Heine Brothers Coffee House on the corner of Bardstown Road, enjoying one of the local mocha specialties when I felt the glare in my direction, like eyes were burning a hole in the back of my head. I turned around and saw what was totally unexpected. A female of my species. This by itself wasn't impossible. Captain Bonnie Red was very female, and so were a number of her crew members. But those were all hard-bitten merchant sailors, or gentle folk of fortune, as their captain would put it. But this one? She was closer to being like me. Smaller, softer looking, like an academic or just an everyday member of my species. She wasn't, however, one that I knew, and that set her apart. That and the way she glared at me. I quickly spun around to avoid looking at her further and focused on my coffee and my data pad. At least she's at another table, but do I know her? Should I approach her? No, she's just minding her own business. Maybe I remind her of somebody she does not like. I made a point of ignoring her, burying my focus into my work and my drink, the comfortable, cool air of the shop, and the light instrumental music that played in the background. Or so I tried to do, but her glare did not stop. I don't know quite when she got up, but it couldn't have been long. I hadn't even finished half my cup when I felt her standing over me. I shifted my attention to the digital table surface and tapped the menu option. I scrolled through, waiting for her to leave. Instead of leaving, she spoke. "You finally see another of our species, and you don't even bother to ask what I'm doing here? You don't introduce yourself? Nothing?" she said, and at that, I had to stop pretending she wasn't there. "I've seen others of our kind here." "Of course you have, outlier," she said, and I felt the bite of her intended use of the word. "I'm sorry?" he asked. "What?" "You are the one who goes by the name Bailey here, aren't you?" she asked, as if for an instant she was unsure she had the right one. I gave a dumb nod and she sat down opposite me without so much as a "by your leave," or "may I join you?" "Can I help you? Do I know you?" I asked. Whatever her issue was, it was clearly with me. "You have the nerve to ask that?" Her glare intensified enough that her teeth were bared for a second longer than they needed to be when she spoke. "You take my spot at the university, then get a trip to Earth to study humans, and screw it up so badly that travel to Earth is prohibited for civilians and non-marine personnel, other than the ones you gatekeep, thus sabotaging my entire planned career path. And you have the nerve to not even say hello, let alone know who I am?" "Yes, I suppose the answer is yes." I admitted I had no idea what she was on about, and I suppose what she said was true, so I had no choice but to acknowledge it. I then tapped my choice on the menu, deciding to order a bacon and egg croissant, since, angry Dlamisa or not, I was definitely hungry. She was tapping her foot on the floor while she glared at me. "I picked up the name Bao when I got here. I think it was some kind of a pun when a human heard me say wow over one of their architectural wonders. Just call me that." "So, Bao, I genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. And are you going to order something? It's considered rude to visit a dining establishment and take up a table while not eating?" I asked. I tried to place her face, but all that happened was a tickled memory about Captain Bonnie saying she brought a single female Dlamison passenger with her on her trip to Earth. Still, she seemed to know me, but that was a one-way street. "She clearly seems to know me. Did we go to the same interview?" My memory came up empty, but my criticism of her lack of an order seemed to fluster her enough that she quickly started tapping items on the menu before settling in. "So, you know their customs at least?" she said, her glare softening a little. "But still, you have no idea what you cost me, how hard I had to work to get here." Bao seemed to practically shake with anger. Her tail bristled and her scent was full of fury. "No, I don't," I admitted. "I have absolutely no idea." My admission did not mollify her. "I joined a merchant ship, the Red Spark. I paid every credit I'd saved over years to get here, everything I had, and that was cheap. I got lucky with even that much. I figured that if I joined a crew with an outlier captain, sooner or later it would come here. I got even luckier that it was sooner rather than later, and I studied the local language for their capital region. I don't even have a translator implant like you." She growled and tilted her head to show that there was no mark beside her ear where it would have been inserted. That was hard. English is an insane language. I don't have a host family to pave my way to an easy success. I've had to work for it all. She leveled her arm at me with her unwavering finger far closer to me than I was comfortable with. I inched back in my chair by a finger width or two. "But you watch me, Bailey. I will surpass you. I will rise to the top of Terran studies. I, not you, will become the galaxy's leading expert on this species. You got in my way enough as it is." Bao was seething when she said it, but I was no less mystified than before. "I still don't know exactly who you are," I said, and she fell silent, staring at me as if I'd grown a second head on my shoulders. You infuriating male!" she snapped as soon as she could form words again. "You're even more annoying than I remember." "You're not helping," I said. I was trying to be sincere, and for a moment at least we had quiet when the human barista approached and set small saucers down in front of each of us. The rich smell of bacon, eggs, and fresh-baked bread was enough to at least buy us a few moments of silence and help her to settle down. "My mother didn't have the means to get me into the programs you got. My mother didn't take the time to get me into the choice packs that would fast-track me through to a higher education. My mother didn't do any of the things for me that yours did for you." She growled and drummed her fingers on the table while I ate. "Your food is going to get cold. It tastes a lot better, hot." I cautioned her. She huffed and threw the whole thing into her mouth at once. "And how do you know what my parent did for me?" "Infuriating." She growled again and accepted the medium-sized paper cup the barista brought to her a moment later. I cocked my head toward her and waited. "You may have been young when I left, but I can hardly believe you don't remember your own sister," she said, and leveled her steady gaze at me. I don't know what I expected her to say, but it wasn't that, nor do I know what she expected me to say, and we had that much in common, so I said the only thing I could think of at the time. "Would you like to join my family and I for dinner?" Her jaw dropped, then closed, then opened. "Infuriating," she said, and drummed her fingers on the table. Her stomach growled. It was the only noise between us. "Yes," she answered, albeit reluctantly. Thus began the next stage in a life I never dreamed of living until I had it, and wouldn't have traded for anything in the world, even if it was a little chaotic. And if I am being completely honest, and I should be, given the spirit of this text, I kind of liked it that way. It was enough to make a boring academic wonder if maybe, just maybe, I was an outlier after all.